we are being addressed by Ayub Khan, who was CILIP president in 2018, and John Dolan, who's been head of Birmingham Libraries and head of library policy for the Museums, Libraries and Archives Council. And they're going to give us a mega encouraging talk, which actually contains the line, "Libraries were the solution." We're glad to hear that. So are there 5 more people I need to let in? I'll admit all of them. Come on. Right. Okay. Well, Ayub and John, I think we're all in now. So take it away.
Right, okay, I'll start off. I am delighted to be asked to do this talk. I'm a long-standing member of your sort of group, and I've been to many informals at Ridgemount Street over the years. And usually we think a turnout of about 8 or 9 in the evenings, around about 6:30, was great. But I was so pleased to see so many people that have joined onto the Zoom call. So it just shows you perhaps doing things in different ways maybe gets a bigger audience. Although I would have really liked to have been sort of talking to you all in person rather than sort of behind the screen. But nevertheless, delighted to be here.
Thanks, and I'm John Dolan, and I'm delighted to be here too. This is the second time I've spoken online. I've been at Zoom things as everybody's doing now. You don't have to go out in this rainy, windy weather, and you don't have to be accused of always holding your meetings in London. So it gives us a chance to meet, albeit artificially on the screen, and talk about some of the things we've all been doing. And obviously later we'll look forward to questions and comments from everybody at the end. We'll speak first and then ramble through our slides, which we hope will be pretty and interesting and attractive. And then look forward to comments. So we'll shut up with the intros and move on, shall we? There we are.
Right, basically, Ayub mentioned what we've sort of been doing, but both John and I have been involved with CILIP for many years, and we've got some of our sort of credentials here, but really you want to hear more about our work than what we've sort of done here. So, John, do you want to say?
Yeah, we've worked together in this way for about 5 years now. We worked together in Birmingham when I was approaching old age and I was a young rookie. You can see that process has continued. But for the last 5 or 6 years, we've worked together on various projects, and it began by us answering an invitation, an advert, so to speak, to sense check some work that the British Council was doing with libraries in Pakistan. Sense check was a new term for us, but it meant have a look at what we're doing and see if we're on the right track. When we got there, there was a lot to do. We helped develop plans and build new libraries in Lahore and Karachi. We continued working with the British Council on other projects. Word got about and said, these are 2 librarians who can talk at length. So that helped. And we continued working on other projects and projects that the British Council were managing. And we'll tell you about some of these during this evening's meeting. But they included stuff with national governments, and with local municipalities, and funded by various sources, obviously governments, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for the work in Bangladesh, and for the work in Basrah Museum Library, which we'll say a bit about, the DCMS Cultural Protection Fund, which we hadn't heard of before, but is an amazing source of support for projects such as we're going to describe.
Right, as John said, we worked on a number of sort of projects, and what we thought today was that we'd share some of the programs and sort of projects with you. And we do know also in the audience there are colleagues that have been involved in some of these sort of projects. So we'd be so interested. We want to leave some time at the end for a good sort of discussion and sort of topics. And I know, for example, Kirsty is on the call, who's done a sort of lot of work, who's a project sort of director and still is in sort of Bangladesh. But what we'd like to do is perhaps talk to you about some of our global experiences with the British Council around the sort of library revolution sort of project, around some of the countries, and sort of John sort of mentioned that to you, but also in terms of some of the public libraries that we worked. Some projects John and I have worked together, and other areas we worked up independently, and others we worked with many of you around sort of study tours and sort of cultural experiences, which we hope we'll be able to share with you this evening. So in terms of the work that we've done with the British Council, the British Council in its heyday had over 200 libraries sort of across the sort of world, as seen as a really important vehicle for cultural engagement. But over the years, the program, by sort of default, many of the libraries started declining, and there was basically a closure of many libraries, sort of, and they were being turned into sort of knowledge centres and other sort of areas there. However, we were brought in to advise on helping, particularly in South Asia, around a new program called the Library Revolution, about looking at the whole thing. Let's reinvent our libraries in South Asia, and let's try and revitalise them after years of arrest and sort of decline, and develop them as cultural sort of convening spaces. And you can see a picture here where we went to, in fact, Sri Lanka. There's 20 sort of odd countries in the South Asia sort of region, and we were invited to Sri Lanka to come and talk to all the country directors and leads within those areas around how they could sort of revitalise the libraries. They were doing a lot of this already on their own steam, but they really wanted some input sort of across our expertise in terms of sort of moving forward. Our first project was in Pakistan, and here you can.
This is me.
Yeah. Oh, go on, John. Yeah.
We spent the morning sharing these out. Get bottled up now. So we, as I said, we kicked off in Pakistan. We landed at Lahore, and because of the demise of the libraries, what would now be 15, 18 years ago, there was no real. There used to be a huge libraries team in Britain and people overseas, but there was no immediate access to library people within the British Council. Obviously, there were others who we met during the process, and we were there to sort of pull in some professional knowledge, which is encouraging for a CILIP meeting and an ILIG meeting. But when we got there, there were two building sites, one in Lahore and one in Karachi, different architects. There were some ideas, but some of it we felt was a bit stereotypical. The shelving had already been acquired. The building sites were in progress. You'll see a picture in a minute. And so we came about, instead of sense checking where we were going, we got really involved and ended up helping with building design, vision and policy statements, strategic planning, collection policies, marketing, audience plans, and a membership scheme. And that, if you like, we were stressing, as everybody wanted to. I mean, they weren't in the past. They were out for a modern library service, vibrant places of culture and community, which everybody could share. Important to mention a couple of people, Peter Upton, who was the country director in Pakistan at the time, but also Stephen Roman, who recently became a fellow of CILIP for his work over many years. He was now, at that time, the regional director. He can go places as a librarian. He was regional director for the British Council in South Asia. But there were challenges, security, you can imagine. How do you have an open door place in an environment that can be challenging and uncertain? And the adjacent buildings, such as high commissions, embassies, and so on, obviously always had to be have very limited or controlled access for the public. There's ongoing management issues, who's going to run it all, staffing, filling the skills gap, and in the end, after the third attempt, they recruited Maria Rehman, who is still with the British Council in Pakistan and is about to move on as a country director in Sri Lanka. But following us, saw the projects through. Okay,
Right.
this is Lahore.
Yeah, so here you've got sort of basically a picture of Lahore Library here. And sort of John talked about all the work that we've sort of been sort of doing, but it was really just like a 10 days project, just come, sense check things. And they realised that running a library and doing library work was a lot more complicated than at first they thought. You needed a collection development policy, you needed processes and procedures in sort of place. So it took sort of quite long, but it was a beautiful site. It was an old merchant house here in Lahore, and you can see the library, how it sort of transferred from a sort of building site when we were there to the sort of beautiful sort of library there. They've had there's a picture there of sort of some of the outreach activities around sort of library walls, digital libraries that they've sort of taken out, and you can see how modern those sort of libraries are with self-service sort of machines and sort of modern furniture. And on the right, you can see the library sort of staff there. But one of the sort of key areas was really around how can you create a modern library service, but also ensure that security was there, because many of the libraries had been closed down after 9/11 and there were lots of security sort of concerns. So we had to sort of marry the sort of two here. But you can see some of the innovations around sort of book walls that happen. And like with all building projects, it takes much longer. So when we got there, and we saw the building sort of start, we thought this is never going to be done in 9 months' time, but it took another sort of 2 years for those sort of libraries to appear. So that one was in Lahore. And John, were you going to say something about Karachi here?
Yeah, it's the next one. You can see the building site there in Lahore, and the new building for the library. In Karachi, it was part of the already part of the commission buildings that were reallocated. And again, there was originally, at the time we arrived, a building site, but a beautiful setting with a planted garden, the library on one side, and the cafe, which you can see on the top right there. Everybody having lunch at the cafe, on the opposite side of the garden. In that second picture from the bottom, from the right on the bottom, the one of me, the one next to that is the staff doing a training session where they're welcoming new members to the library and rehearsing the kind of script they would use with people. Remember that all these staff, I think in the whole 2 libraries, only one of them had any library experience. And we did, on the study tours, which we'll talk about later, spend a lot of time working through CILIP's PKSB to illustrate the kind of skills they needed. But they were fantastic people. Bright, energetic, interested, enthusiastic. We had a wonderful time with them, and so that was very rewarding. What was happening there in that building, interesting as part of the British Council's work, back one, please, was that the building was already being used for the library. It had training rooms. Had training rooms, and they were already being used for one of the British Council's project with fashion designers. And I'm down there at the bottom with the Vivienne Westwood of Pakistan, called Marine Khan, who said I had a good style, she thought. So I had my photograph taken with her to get a bit of reflected.
You made me back to Zimbabwe, John.
The other thing was the government support and the Assistant High Commissioner meeting us at the library there with the staff. So Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a different experience again. Here we had 2 libraries, one in Bulawayo, one in Harare, maybe the other way around. Harare was an older setting, adjacent to the embassy, but it was very cramped. The furniture was old, buildings were tired. In Bulawayo, we had a 6th floor of an office block. So in one sense, you'd think that was a bit out of the way, but actually it was in the city centre. Once you got there, you get the lift up, and it was a more sort of 1970s, 80s kind of design in terms of libraries, but it was fresh looking still. Again, good staff here. We did have librarians, and we talked about staggered change at Harare, and perhaps some tidying up and modernization, sort of more streamlined appearance and accessible appearance, so to speak, at Bulawayo.
We were also asked to do some consultation workshops with users and non-users. They really wanted to develop their libraries to the next sort of level, and develop a business plan, which they asked us to help them sort of with. So we've had the privilege of getting a whole range of those that use the current library that sort of John sort of described in both areas, as well as perhaps those that have never used the library, around what would make them use the library, what needs to be fulfilled, and what was already out there. So we really had a sort of great time, in a sense, by doing these sort of workshops. We also visited like a gold mining plant. But there, we could see the library there and how it would compare. We wouldn't want to sort of duplicate resources. And here you can see some of the workshops that we're sort of running. And some of the key themes that were coming out was around the use of the sort of current resources. They wanted more sort of modern books, particularly around business, entrepreneurship. They needed more study space. A huge sort of issue sort of in Zimbabwe around cramped housing and sort of having access to sort of places where they can go, and internet and Wi-Fi was absolutely essential, as was the digital resources. So we really felt that we could go to the support the country directors in terms of that. Don't know what that was, somebody's mobile phone plus that. So that was really interesting. That we moved along.
Just that bottom line there, Ayub, if you remember, one of the reasons for the non-users was the familiar phrase to all of us, I haven't got the time. And of course, it was about having the right resources and facilities, so that it was worth making the time to use the library. In Zimbabwe, we did visit some public libraries, didn't we? And that was really innovating. We put this in not because we worked with them, it was part of understanding the context in which we were working with the British Council. But there were a number of this significant public library set up, and it was good to visit them. And here are a few scenes from them. Lovely decor and posters. Be a hero, read. And interestingly, I must put a plug in there. While we were there, the week before, parcels had arrived from Book Aid International. I don't know if any of you know Book Aid International, but it's a UK-based charity that takes new books to low-income countries for their libraries, and a parcel had arrived with floor mats, so you can see the kids sitting on the floor, and a whole load of new books. They were absolutely delighted. So if you can find, if you can spare a £5 or a tenner for Book Aid International, remember them, please.
The other thing I mentioned is just to go back to the libraries. Zimbabwe. When we first came there, we said, well, why have you hidden the library right at the back? Why is it sort of right at the edge of the compound, right inside? Nobody knows it's there. And also you've got no signs as well saying library. You know, that's the first thing you could do, is basically bring the library much closer to the entrance of the whole complex at the British Council there, and put a big sign. And what they basically said was, they said they had a passionate country director. So when the British Council had this policy of closing their libraries around the country, he basically hid their library right at the edge. And basically nobody really went to Zimbabwe, and they didn't want a sign there. So they just said, we've got a small little learning centre at the back, and it's not really a library. But they basically kept that library going after all the sort of policy changes that happened about sort of closing them down. So that was really interesting and sort of quite heartening for us, because they were so basically proud, and they would have really got in trouble if they'd not followed the regulation from London to close their library. So they hid the library right at the edge. John, I think it's you next about digital.
Yeah, this is a whole other area, but obviously not unconnected. Throughout this, the whole digital world is a given. I mean, I'm not going to get into the importance of the internet. It's just there. And while we were involved with South Asia, we were asked to help develop a strategy to create a digital library for South Asia. This was seen as crucial to learning, communications, economic development. It would give the British Council the opportunity to reach rural communities, to reach countries where perhaps for security or policy reasons it couldn't have a physical presence. And it obviously could give it current information, the kind of stuff we were hearing about in Zimbabwe, current and bang up to date information in a managed way, in a library way, to a massive population across South Asia. But you know, we knew that once you'd set it up for South Asia, a couple of adaptations, you're talking about the potential for a worldwide digital provision. And we'll say there are no pictures because it's a digital invention, digital innovation rather. But what you say is the cover of our report.
And what's really interesting is, particularly as we sort of develop this sort of digital library for sort of South Asia, because we talked about these libraries in Lahore and Karachi that were stirring up a lot of interest in sort of libraries there. But we've got to realise, what can one library do when you talk about population of 20 million in that sort of area? So therefore, the digital library reach can be far more effective there. Particularly, some of these countries, as John said in that slide, have quite high penetrations of interactive and connectivity through mobile sort of phones. So they've basically leapfrogged generations of different types of platforms and sort of come directly to sort of digital mobile sort of platforms. So therefore, huge potential. And here are some of the themes that we're sort of following in terms of what that digital library could do around facilitating creation and preserving of digital some knowledge, scholarly research around exploiting sort of digital sort of skills for staff and sort of students. So we really had some quite interesting workshops. I think we had the workshops, I think, in Dubai, where we basically put all the sort of countries together to talk about, well, what could this digital library do? And it was really interesting because Dubai really isn't in South Asia, as you'll know, but that was the most convenient.
Hello, how are you?
Where you can get people from across the globe together, because you know there would be visa restrictions in there. And what we just learned quite recently through a colleague of ours who's the head of the sort of digital libraries in South Asia. She said during lockdown, when all the other activities and facilities of the British Council were restricted, they couldn't do exams and other areas, all the country directors were saying, we really want a digital presence because that's one thing we can provide during this period of lockdown. So it's really sort of developed in terms of providing.
Hey, you've muted for some reason.
Sorry, not for South Asia, but also for the world. So this digital library is going across the whole globe. Next slide, John.
That's the way it is. So that digital thing is huge and it's global, and it reminds us of that little catchphrase of ours that every library is a centre of global communications. Every library includes public libraries. So we're going to say a little bit about some of our work with public libraries now. There we go. And one of the biggest projects, and the one we've been most closely involved with over quite a long period, is the Libraries Unlimited program. Nothing to do with Devon Libraries Unlimited. I think Bangladesh got there first, and that's what it's called. But with us this evening is Kirsty Crawford, I think. So hopefully Kirsty can chip in afterwards and correct all the wrong things we're saying. But it was interesting. Again, we were invited to help with this program, which was about modernising the public library services in Bangladesh that were managed directly from the Department of Public Libraries in the Ministry of Cultural Affairs. So that's equivalent, if you like, to the DCMS. There was funding from the government and from the Gates Foundation. Interestingly, you see the policy up there at the top of the slide about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which CILIP has if you like, embraced in recent years as well. The whole thing about access to information was a high priority. And interesting in terms of Western stereotypes about places like South Asia, Women were among the priority groups, young people and entrepreneurs, and it was seen very much as that spectrum between education and economy as being the purpose of it all. The outcomes in the end, the Kirsty could tell us a little bit more later. Some of the building developments have been limited by all sorts of constraints. It's a slow process. It's a slow bureaucracy, if you like, and so on. But there've been a massive training program for library staff who've shot forward 50 years, I think, in terms of what they've learned to do and how they've developed. There's a library management system. There are computers and Wi-Fi installed. There's a lots of community engagement. We'll mention that when we talk about our study tours over here with these people later on. Lots of programs and events, and there you can see some of the that's the central library. You can see how busy it is. Look, all the seats are taken. Everybody's in there. Again, one of those lovely banners with a motto. Bottom picture at the middle, a very slow manual bibliographic service processes, counters, manual services. Again, all waiting, if you like, waiting.
I'm sorry, but it seems that the slide hasn't changed. I'm still seeing the British Council Zimbabwe. I don't know about anybody else.
Anybody else? We should be seeing the picture of Dhaka Central Library. Can somebody shout out if that's what they can see?
What I can see is
I can see that.
I can see that.
I can see that. I can see it as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe the person who has a problem, her screen is frozen.
I think your personal screen's frozen. Okay.
Okay.
We're on the other side of the world. We're in Dhaka Central Library now.
Hopefully it will unfreeze. I don't think that's anything we can do anything about. But yeah, we're in Dhaka Central Library, and I was saying it was busy, as were all the libraries. You'll see another picture in a minute. But processes were all manual. There's the children's library. I think, Ayub, you're going to try that.
Yes, so here you can see a picture of the children's library in sort of Dhaka. It's rather sort of traditional. However, we had such sort of simple ideas like, all you need to do is move the furniture differently, and that would just create a different type of space. You can see it looks a bit like a sort of classroom. And other areas we were sort of thinking about being a lot more adventurous. But one of the things that we did learn about our travel, really sort of in Bangladesh and particularly this library, it was more of an evolution rather than a revolution. So sometimes where in Pakistan they really wanted a revolution completely, I think here at the start we couldn't just say, look, from this type of library, let's create a completely different type of library. Had to go through a number of iterations, and they are planning a brand new central library. So the idea was, let's basically get them along what a new sort of Dhaka Central Library will be. Also,
Kirsty can give us an update on that at the end and how that's going.
Because they've had architects and all sorts looking at what a modern sort of library would be, and we shared some of our experience around the Library of Birmingham and what that might be. We also had the privilege, and we're really fortunate to go and visit some places outside Dhaka to some rural sort of branches, because the Libraries Unlimited project was, across sort of trying to look at the whole sort of range of 70-odd sort of libraries across there. And here we came out, and we were really sort of so privileged because of security concerns. We felt a bit like royalty or sort of politicians, because the special forces in Bangladesh had to escort us with their high-speed sort of cars because we were going out of sort of Dhaka, and security apparently was an issue. So we were escorted by these sort of police there, and that's the special sort of reaction force, I think, there. We were there, and you can see some of the amazing sort of libraries we went to this tiny little library. You can see all those men, sort of young boys, all sitting around there, because unemployment is quite an issue there, and they're basically all studying to try and sort of better themselves sort of across there. And you can see some of the smaller sort of libraries there, but we better move on.
Just a point there, just a point, Ayub, I think worth pointing out. You see the shelving, how packed the stock is on the shelves. There is a view that books are precious and important because they're costly or they're rare or there aren't many new. So there's a great reluctance to remove books from stock. But of course, it creates a very cramped kind of shelving. And we spent a lot of time talking about, you know, careful selection, about having a policy, setting priorities for what kind of stock you should have, displaying it better, and so on and so forth. These are things that perhaps here in the UK we might take for granted, but you know, it was part of pulling people forward into the way that the public would see the library in the future.
We also visited some NGOs who ran some amazing sort of libraries. Here we were with the sort of Director General of the sort of public libraries, and we were sort of sending him, you know, going with him and saying, well, look at all these other libraries that exist. You know, is there some learning that you can sort of do sort of from here? It had a rooftop sort of refreshments or cafe. They were sort of looking at some refurbishments of that idea. So they had good libraries there. You didn't really need to go and visit other libraries and other places. They had a lot there, but actually we helped make some of the connections across there. And also the NGO also ran 200 mobile libraries across that. It wasn't sort of a government sort of department or municipal, it was a charity, but so now it's managed by the sort of public library, but originally it all was part of the NGO. And they had these amazing sort of mobiles that went into small rural sort of villages, taking books and sort of learning there. We can see some of the areas that we sort of had sort of along there. I'm sort of moving on because I'm just sort of conscious of sort of the time.
A big part of the Libraries Unlimited program was obviously advocacy, because you're going to have all this change. You've got to win people over. You've got to win over government. You've got to win over stakeholders and partners. And you can see that slide in the middle of the panel discussion on National Library Day. Kirsty, who is with us this evening, is there at the right hand end of that row of people speaking. But National Libraries Day, or National Library Day, was one of the outcomes of the advocacy, and it's now on the 5th of February. It's every year. There are rallies and demonstrations and parades. I mean, it's a really big show, and it was initiated 2 or 3 years ago with a statement by the Prime Minister in Parliament. So that is an advocacy story worth noting. Lots of people, awareness raising was critical in the public, and support raising, if you like, in government and stakeholders and partners. And
also what was interesting was their National Libraries Day is a government sanctioned sort of day. So we have National Libraries Day sort of here, National Libraries Week. But in a sense, we've created it. It's, you know, our professional body. We've just said, right, we'll do it. But here, they basically got government support, Parliament sort of basically allowed it to be a national sort of day to celebrate sort of books and reading. So that was so great to have that. And
I think to be fair, yeah, just to clarify or remind what we might have said at the beginning, Bangladesh work is managed by the British Council. Kirsty's the director, in partnership with the government. So that's the access to the government, and the government's responsiveness to what the British Council proposes and how they work together to produce these changes, National Library Days and so on.
Yeah. We also ran some policy days, and you can see here, those that are eagle-eyed, you can see our current president there, Judy, President Boat. We basically invited, Kirsty invited her also to Bangladesh, where we basically ran some sessions around specific policy areas around children and young people, around sort of digital exclusion, around that. So these were some of the areas there. So we had a sort of great time, some of our experience, but also sort of learning sort of together. And this was an area around sort of funding and inventory sort of management sort of libraries. But also what we did do was we invited lots of different types of library colleagues to this event, the universities as well, because they really didn't have a very well-formed professional association that could do it. And it was the Libraries Unlimited and the British Council that brought colleagues together here. And on the right, you can see that's a British Council library in sort of Dhaka. and they've got a grand piano there, which was there. And we met Suchel there, who was a HR sort of colleague, but he's also a pianist. So before we had our policy forum, he basically done a play of some sort of tunes across there. John, you?
Yeah, something completely different, really. Both of us have done projects separately, and the one perhaps I'm most proud of, really, was working with Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, bringing together my profession and my Irish heritage. In 2008, there was the crash. Ireland was hugely affected, as everybody will know, and really the public library service was one of those public services that was under threat. The Library Council of Ireland was shut down, but a smaller libraries team was established within a government agency called the Local Government Management Agency. And I was invited to assist with reviewing what they'd been doing with libraries. A bit like going to Pakistan, what happened was once we started reviewing, we realized that the real issue was about going forward. And so that's what they did. And there was huge national leadership from government and from the LGMA. All the county managers, hesitantly, but at first, supported it. The county manager is equivalent to the local authority chief executive here in the UK, and the county librarians, and of course the Library Association of Ireland, which with whom CILIP have the joint conference every year in either the Republic or Northern Ireland. We did an extensive consultation program with user groups across the country. I designed a consultation process. We briefed staff, and they held consultation meetings with unemployed people, with mums and children, with families, with people needing further education, and so on, all over the country. We brought that all together to create, if you like, a new era of collaboration, to create a 5-year plan. That's the one you see there, Opportunities for All.
Right.
Ayub, please. Not finished.
Oh, sorry.
2013, 2017, and the momentum was there, and a new plan was published in 2018, taking them up to 2022. So what was important was a national government-led strategy for public libraries, something we've hankered after in the UK for a long time, well, outside Scotland anyway, and Wales, but something that is a model, I think, for anybody who wants to think about how you put together a national plan for change. And it has led to significant change in the quality and scale and range of library services. Really interesting stuff. Have a look at our public library. It's all on Google, you'll find it on the web. Thank you. But Ireland, yeah, good model for lessons about national programs. Thanks, Ed. Right.
One of the projects I was asked to sort of work on with all this sort of international sort of experience, particularly sort of through IFLA as well. In Dubai, they were basically building one of the sort of world's biggest sort of libraries, and they've been sort of on this project for some time, and you can see a picture of it there. It's a shape of a book. Huge project, very prestigious. It's still to open, and has sort of taken some time to sort of get through, get to this place there. And they wanted some work around international benchmarking, around what makes a world-leading library, what basically are the ingredients around success, how can they basically ensure that readers continue to get there, what are the best policies and best procedures around the world. So I was really very fortunate to be asked, actually, would I go and interview leading world sort of class libraries sort of across the sort of globe, and basically write a report and really say what makes these libraries really sort of tick, and what can they learn in Dubai in terms of developing this sort of new library. So I had the privilege of interviewing all the sort of directors of all these libraries, doing some research and benchmarking around library sort of success, and what they could learn and what not to do in terms of that. So that was really interesting, and somewhere in the Middle East, somewhere basically in the States, or the sort of in Europe, and that was a really interesting sort of project to sort of talk to them about. And then also to help them develop policies and procedures around, because it was a brand new library, how do you do interlibrary loans, how do you do lending, how will self-service there. So basically, again, it was a project that perhaps should have been only sort of, a few days of support, ended up to be a much longer term sort of project around looking sort of globally, and then sort of spending quite some time in Dubai, and also visiting many local libraries in Dubai around how this central library, this new independent library, will interface with the local libraries, and also around the sort of special sort of collections sort of across here. So that was a really interesting sort of project there. I could sort of talk to you all evening about that, but I'm just conscious, I think we've got 15 minutes left.
Let's press on.
So we'll have to go really quickly.
This was a completely different thing again. You'll be familiar with the place Basrah. A museum has been created there with the support of the Friends of Basrah Museum, which is a spin-off, if you like, from the British Institute of the Study of Iraq. Started interestingly by some of the military. We wanted to do something, if you like, to start to repair the damage of the war. And they created this beautiful museum. There's just a couple of scenes at the ceiling of the domed entrance and so on that you can see. We were there for the opening of the museum in March last year. But where you see that picture at the bottom, me standing in the big room, was they wanted a research library to go with it. And that's one of two rooms that were to be the research library. There's a whole story here. But what was interesting for us was to make the switch from the public or the British Council Library to something that was a research library. And for that, we turned to the Cadbury Library at the University of Birmingham, which had in recent years been refurbished, remodeled, had up-to-date policies, standards, design, security systems, and so on. And of course, we had familiarity with research and rare materials at Birmingham and other places we've been involved in. But this was something that said it felt really rewarding to do it. The Friends of Basrah Museum, if you Google it, you'll see pictures of the stuff of the museum, certainly. The library was designed and finished early this year, but of course there's been unrest in Iraq during these months, so it's only sort of tentatively open. What was interesting, they were very open to the idea of using a room on the ground floor, which had already been designated as sort of an educational learning room. And that would offer opportunities to reinterpret the collections for local families, schools, for young archaeologists, as they call them, who would be inspired to become the researchers and the archaeologists of the future. And this is an area of the world that is important to all our heritages. We also very pleased to be working with.
Yeah. We also went to visit the university library, which was a 20-minute drive from here, and they study their library and information science. It was quite traditional and lacked resources. And I think what they wanted to do is use this library to reinvigorate the whole library profession, so that at least there would be a library nearby that would be a model library that had sort of collection development sort of policies and IT and access in terms of what modern sort of practices would be. So obviously this small sort of library as part of a museum sort of complex would really make much more significant impact across the whole country through sort of learning and engagement for future sort of librarians here. Right, study tours. I'm just conscious that we've got 10, 15 minutes. Should we go through these or should we start the discussion? I could just give you basic...
Just flick through the slides. I mean, basically, for most projects, we've held study tours in the UK. And we've brought people to visit libraries around the UK and see all sorts of stuff from good practice, technology, to meet with policymakers. Perhaps we just move on another slide here. People can pick up the gist of it. Policy level. There's Maynard from Zimbabwe with Carla Hayden at CILIP conference in 2017. Yeah. There are policymakers at DCMS. Yeah. And I think Nicholas Bornfield's with us tonight, who helped with one of the study tours earlier this year. People from Myanmar. There are places we've not mentioned yet. talking at policy level as well as practice level.
Yeah. And at the right, at the bottom, you've got, we're at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. I'm in Stratford this evening, and next door is the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, and it's a picture with Tagore there. We also visited places around sort of the country. We went to sort of Warwickshire, Glasgow, Manchester, Southwark, Camden, Tower Hamlets, Story House. Where we've got those hard helmets is where Story House was being built at that stage there. And we also connected with lots of institutions such as British Library, the Wellcome Trust, mentioned the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, but also CILIP, Arts Council, Libraries Connect and DCMS also helped in terms of sharing sort of best practice. You know, sometimes we knock you know, what's happening in the UK libraries, but around the world, people do really look to us to see we've got one of the most innovative library systems in the world, and they really do look to us. You can see some of the digital technology, the 3D maker spaces that we were showing them, and that sorrel in the middle at Coventry Library there. We went to visit lots of...
I think a word of special thanks for the British Library, who were the victims of just about every study tour. Ended up somewhere at the British Library.
Because
your help.
All our colleagues, the first place to say we want to go to a British Library, and we say, actually, we'd be much better if you went to a small, medium type of rural library. You're more likely to gain experience that you can sort of take away with them. So we did try and build in some branch libraries as part of that. You can see there was a small little library in Harbury here, and also in Birmingham, in Handsworth, and then there's a, as well as some of the London ones. We say you don't need to always go to the big libraries like the Library of Birmingham or British Library. Let's look at those. And on the right, you can see some of the areas that we covered. John, do you just want to cover this one?
Yeah, just two things there really was go back one. Two things there. One was the constant emphasis on community engagement. And in low-income countries, the importance, in spite of all our debates here, the importance of volunteers. And the reason we're at Harbury was it's one of Warwickshire's volunteer-run libraries, and it was very well run. There's no question of that, with the support from Ayub's team and so on and so forth. A model of how to run a volunteer-run library if you've got to do it. But in some countries, you can't not have volunteers. You just need it because there isn't the money to have full teams of staff. It's worth noting that, I think, and bearing that in mind when we compare, if you like. And then there was a bit of fun, wasn't there?
Yeah, a bit of fun. Now, rather than perhaps go through these, because we've only got 10 minutes to have the discussion, we'll send all these slides with you about what we've learned, the emerging themes, sort of partnerships in terms of technology, what basically success factors look like in terms of our area. We've also written an article in the latest CILIP update where you can get some of this
information professional.
Oh yeah, that's CILIP update, information professional across there. So you'll be able to get that, and also a bit about being sort of consultant, what we've learned. But maybe we'll some of this can come out of the questions and answers, because we'd really be interested to get your sort of take on and answer some of the questions before we sort of finish. So does that seem okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Questions and comments welcome. I think the best way to sort them is if people type their questions in the chat. I think that's because I don't think we're all visible, and if so, I don't think raising hands is going to be practicable. So if we type our questions in the chat, that will be useful. I've got one to start off with. You mentioned welcoming scripts at one library. Did you have any input into those scripts, or?
Yeah, we were talking about, obviously it was a part of a sort of like a chain of understanding. So it would come down, it would emanate from the policy of why we were all there and the strategy for the library development and so on. And that would lead down to the audiences, the customers, what you were trying to provide, what you were trying to, what needs you were trying to serve, and that would lead into the kind of welcome you would give to people coming to the library for the first time. I remember that particular situation was the Karachi British Council Library, where, you know, there hadn't been a library for donkey's years. People were coming to a new building, beautiful place, fabulous design and everything, but a new experience for many younger people. So it was important that people had a way of, and exercised how to deliver that sort of welcome, particularly given the fact that most of the people hadn't worked in libraries either. So you had the people with the new knowledge and the people with very little knowledge meeting for the first time in the doorway of the library.
You mentioned also collection development policies, and you mentioned gifts. How do these come together? What have you found in collection development policies about the treating of gifts?
Yeah, what was really interesting from all the projects that we work on, there was this sort of assumption, we'll just accept books, we'll accept gifts, people want to donate. And we really had to work hard by trying to, first of all, saying, what is the purpose of your library? What do you want to try and achieve? And what type of resources do you need in there? And we really had to work quite hard to get the notion of what a collection development policy is, and the idea that you shouldn't just accept donations without sort of thinking through whether they're up to date, whether they'll be useful to the collection, whether they would add something. So we had to do some very basic librarianship around collection development. Book Aid are really good because they really think carefully about what's needed. They won't send old books or books that are really sort of dilapidated. But in some of the places we went to do, the books were really quite old, and we had to do some very, very basic librarianship around the whole thing, around having a collection development policy, and particularly around sort of the whole notion about censorship and something. Some of the countries that we worked with, we had some quite sort of delicate discussions around what the role and purpose of the library was.
Ooh.
It was lovely, with just going back to the Book Aid International thing, and see Steve Russell has put the link up again on the chat. To see it happening at the other end. I mean, I donate, maybe many of you donate, I'm sure you do. But to be there a week after it's all arrived and see the glow on the kids' faces was fabulous. And it's new stuff. It's not secondhand stuff. It's new stuff. It used to be just Sub-Saharan Africa. Now they've broadened their field across other countries. Good Christmas present, people.
Yeah.
Donation.
Yeah, there's a question here.
A question there, Natalie Ward.
Yeah, did you base your policies on existing examples from some British libraries, or had to write them sort of from scratch?
A bit of both, really. I mean, we obviously, like you saw with Ayub's work in Dubai, you draw on what colleagues have done in other situations and other settings. But our starting point was very often the audience, the market. Who are you trying to reach, and what do you want to do for them? And then we would pull in other experiences. I mentioned the Cadbury Research Library in terms of the library at Basrah, and we looked at their policy documentation to help develop stuff there. So it's a mix of learning from colleagues, learning from our own experience, and also matching it very closely to what was happening on the ground in the place where you were trying to deliver the service. It's not a mirror, just a reflection. Not a copy, just a reflection of what you see elsewhere. And of course, colleagues are great. We've got lots of really good examples of good stuff around the world.
Maybe Kirsty, could you give us a very brief update about what's happening in Bangladesh at the moment, particularly with lockdown? Are you in Bangladesh? Are you here back in the UK?
Hi.
Hello, Kirsty.
Can you hear me? Yeah, it's the libraries have been closed since March in Bangladesh, so it's been really difficult. We're not allowed to do anything face-to-face or do any kind of real project work. But what we're trying to do is get them prepared for perhaps another lockdown. So making sure that the Wi-Fi is in place, that we're helping them with a digital strategy. So like marketing, how to do social media, helping with that, giving them lists of free resources that are available for everybody. And what I think helps, because the project's due to finish in March, and what we hope is that we have made it more sustainable with having a national public library policy. So that's gone through 2 years of work now, based on what John and Ayub actually had given us in terms of the vision for the libraries. And the National Public Library Policy is now going to working groups with the other ministries, because it's all got to go through Cabinet, as you said, with National Library Day. Everything has to go through the government, so the policy will go through government, all the other ministries. So that's been hugely appreciated, I think, in terms of the library network in Bangladesh. Just having a national public library policy, something to sustain the libraries and to ensure their future, has been, I think, one of the biggest successes in Bangladesh. The new library, the Prime Minister has told them to get on with it, but the thing with the new Central Public Library is that they are building it next to the museum, so the museum needs to agree it all as well. So it's been a bit, it's been a long process. When I arrived in Bangladesh in September 2017, they were supposed to be starting the build of the new library, and that's still not happened. So the bureaucracy runs rather slowly, I would say. But yeah, just making sure that everything we've done and everything we are doing is sustainable for the future and for when the project's finished.
Thanks. There are a couple of. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't add that. I mean, Kirsty, I'm sure is up for contact if anybody's interested in what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely, of course.
Because it's the public libraries, the Bangladeshi government and British Council working in partnership, and that's great. But it is slow, and I think in some low-income countries we tend to sort of rather snobbishly look at how the bureaucracy is slow, and the organisations are very hierarchical, there are lots of levels. In some ways, that's not a good thing. In some ways, it's what it is, and you have to live with it, and that's what you work with. And things take longer. But at the same time, you've got this passion for books. The South Asia, Indian subcontinent, passion for literature, passion for books, and an enthusiasm for learning. And as Ayub said earlier, leapfrogging the sort of 19th century into the future is great. There's a question there.
Aidan wants to say something. There
are a couple of questions related.
Yeah. John Aykroyd had one about skills.
John Aykroyd asks about the skills base in the different countries and what the gaps are. And Christiana Ikeyoko asks, do you think the British Council could have prepared locals to take over the libraries before closing them? You said there was no librarianship knowledge in Lahore.
I'm just interested, I had an insight. I did some work in India a number of years ago, and I was asked to go to Bhopal. Now, you will have all heard of Bhopal because of the chemical disaster there. And that's, in fact, what happened there, that the municipality took over the library, to the point where the local library, although it was named after an important figure, was known as the British Library. But it was much smaller than our British Library. But the municipality had taken it over, and I'm still in touch with the librarian there, fantastic guy, and running a very nice library service, albeit in not a massive building, but a good active outreach, lots of stuff, learning programs, all sorts of stuff going on. So it could have happened in many places, but I know it happened in Bhopal.
Yeah. The other thing, Aidan, to your sort of question around sort of training, one of the areas that we've been really interested when we're working with countries abroad is around sustainability. So what we've basically been saying, we've done it in Dubai, let's talk to the universities about ensuring that there is good library skills sort of training that's going to happen there, because that's going to be the sustainability of those libraries. So yeah, if you haven't got librarians, we're going to get the future librarians, and are they going to have the skills? So some of the work we did abroad in sort of Bangladesh and Pakistan was talking to the library schools and look at their curriculum. And that's one of the reasons we invited Judy Preston-Boches to talk about curriculum approaches, about what is modern librarianship, and that will really help with future sustainability of the sector in those countries.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Could I just say hello to Fiona Scannell before her comment? It's from Wicklow. Hello, Fiona. Glad you're pleased with the way the national programme is working in Ireland. I can't see where you are on the screen, but that doesn't matter. It was fantastic work. I loved it. Worked with you for 2 years with colleagues.
Thanks very much.
Good luck in Wicklow. I'll be back soon.
Right.
Look forward to it.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you, John and Ayub, very much. And thank you, everyone else, for your questions. Gosh, this has been quite an evening, quite an informative evening. It's been recorded, and so it will be available on YouTube before very long. So thanks for everyone for turning out, and especially to John and Ayub. I'm not sure that we can all clap you on this medium, but certainly I'm clapping now, and there've been enough comments. Oh, someone's found a logo for Clapter. And
There you go.
yeah, I don't know how to do
Reactions.
it. I can see several people have it now. Right, okay. Well, this is the best I can do. Yeah.
And a thumbs up as well. Yes.
Thumbs up. Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, thanks very much, everyone. And further Clapter, good night.
Thank you from us. It's been a pleasure doing it. And don't forget to support ILIG.
Exactly.
Go international. Don't be narrow-minded. Go international.
Yes. Yes.
The world awaits you.
Yes. And
Thank you so much.
Great fun. That last slide we had about being a consultant, we wanted to, because of the time we were constrained, but we wanted to say that you can be international, you can work internationally, you can get involved with colleagues overseas without, well, you can see here we are, all right, without leaving your desk, without leaving your living room anymore. So do, and ILIG obviously got, the international scene is just so exciting, it's just so interesting, but it's hard work, but it's interesting.
Yes.
Fascinating, motivating, confusing. When you say,
Yeah. Okay then.
Okay.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.